The next day, Mitchell is living his best life, full of energy, while Gia is completely exhausted and not in the mood for his antics. Their goal today is to find food, something vital for their survival. Mitchell keeps reiterating the importance of food, but Gia can't help but feel irritated. She barely slept at all thanks to what happened the night before, and now Mitchell's boundless energy is only making it worse. As they walk, Mitchell warns Gia to be careful because the grass might irritate her skin. Gia doesn't worry about it, but eventually realizes why Mitchell is acting so cautious. She smiles to herself, understanding what's going on. When Mitchell asks what she's thinking, she assures him to not worry about it and just keep moving forward. Gia thinks she's figured it out. She believes Mitchell's over-the-top energy is a result of the suspension bridge effect, a psychological phenomenon where people tend to develop stronger feelings for someone when they experience intense, arousing situations together. She believes Mitchell is trying to gain attraction points by using their current survival situation to ease the awkwardness between them. It explains why he's been so energetic and overdramatic lately. Gia can't help but be impressed by how Mitchell has been trying to work his charm, but she tells him not to overdo it, as he's already pretty cool without trying so hard. Mitchell, caught off guard, asks if it was too obvious. Gia, with a smirk, reminds him that they've known each other for so long. Of course she noticed. Mitchell is surprised, but then suddenly he apologizes for what he's about to do. Before Gia can process, he dramatically stumbles and falls to the ground. Gia stares in shock as Mitchell lies there, looking sick. It's a beautiful day on the island, but Mitchell is unwell. Gia can't believe what's happening. He's always warned her not to get sick or hurt, but now he's the one who's sick. His primal instincts kick in as he tries to get up, but Gia rushes to stop him, worried because he has a fever. Mitchell insists that he's fine now and that he needs to get up to work. He has to keep the fire going and find food. After all, he promised Gia he would get them out of there alive. Gia hesitates, but she can see the determination in Mitchell's eyes. She knows he won't stop until he's done what he set out to do, even if he's clearly not feeling well. Gia, frustrated with Mitchell, decides to tie him up to force him to rest. "Shut up and get some rest," she commands. She even teases him. "I bet you'd rather be the one tied up instead." Mitchell demands to be untied, but Gia stands firm. "If you want to get untied, do it yourself. You love showing off your strength, right? This should be light work for you." But Mitchell admits that he's not strong enough for that. Gia reiterates that Mitchell's only job now is to rest. She'll go out and find food. Mitchell begs her not to go, asking her not to worry about him. But Gia snaps. "Why can't I worry about you?" Mitchell is taken aback, and Gia continues, explaining that he's been working non-stop since they arrived, overworking himself. She wonders if Mitchell thinks she's untrustworthy, and that's why he's been pushing himself so hard. Mitchell apologizes, but Gia has had enough. "Stop apologizing. We're a married couple. You should trust me," she says firmly. "Get some rest, please." After a long pause, Mitchell finally accepts his fate and thanks her. Once he's settled down, Gia begins to second-guess herself. She feels embarrassed for saying something so dramatic. "Trust me because we're a married couple." It sounds like something straight out of a K-drama. She rolls around on the ground in frustration, unsure of how to face Mitchell after that. But then a sudden realization hits her. This is a waste of time. Worrying about Mitchell's reaction isn't helping either of them. He will get better, but she needs to focus on survival. At home, she could press a button and have food delivered instantly, but right now, in the middle of nowhere, she's been searching for food for hours without success. Her stomach growls in protest, and her vision starts to blur. She's losing her sense of direction, but she knows she has to keep going. After another hour of fruitless searching, Gia spots wild mushrooms. She's tempted, but something about them doesn't seem right. They look poisonous. Reluctantly, she moves on, realizing that finding food isn't going to be easy. So far, Gia has only managed to collect a few pieces of fruit and is now reluctantly forced to search the beach. Trash regularly washes up there, and the place is rank, with rotting fruit and flies everywhere. Gia wanted to avoid it, but it's also the most likely spot to find something edible. She starts flipping over debris and searching the water. Suddenly, she spots crabs. She's face to face with her potential dinner and begs them not to run away. Gia slowly inches closer, determined, and is just within arm's reach of one of the crabs, but then, out of nowhere, a wave, similar to the one that sank their ship, appears behind her, and Gia freezes. She thinks this is the end. As the wave looms, Gia begins to reflect on her life. Why does nothing ever go her way? From switching schools in middle school, to taking an extended leave from university, to abandoning her passion for writing novels, it always feels like nothing works out, even when she's trying to do something for Mitchell's benefit. Right now, she just needs help to survive. Just as Gia laments her bad luck, something suddenly hits her on the head. She thinks it's a sign that God is punishing her, but then she looks up and sees something unbelievable. A tub of chocolate protein floating in front of her in pristine condition. It's a miracle that will save them from starvation and, more importantly, keep Mitchell's gains intact. Gia can't believe her luck. Night falls and Mitchell finally wakes up, looking around in confusion. Gia greets him cheerfully, commenting on his perfect timing. Her meal is almost ready. Mitchell, still groggy from his rest, asks what's going on. Gia excitedly reveals that she's made protein porridge. As Gia drinks the nutrient-dense meal she prepared, she eagerly asks if Mitchell isn't going to eat. She reminds him of how much effort it took to make this, trying to spoon-feed him the protein porridge. Mitchell resists, clearly not interested. Gia, determined to get him to eat, continues to remind him that this is the same protein he loves back home, asking why he won't eat it. Mitchell attempts to explain that all the essential amino acids have broken down due to the boiling, but Gia dismisses it, saying that's nonsense. She insists that he eat the porridge to get better, but Mitchell still resists. Then, when Gia isn't looking, he grabs her bandaged hand and asks what happened. Startled, she quickly pulls her hand out of his grasp. Gia hesitates for a moment before explaining what happened. Mitchell repeats her words, saying she got caught by a wave while looking for food for him. Gia corrects him, blushing, and says the food wasn't just for him. Mitchell's in disbelief, and Gia nervously avoids eye contact. But soon her emotions spill over, and she starts yelling, venting her frustration. She tells him how she went through all that trouble to get food specifically for him, and asks if he has a problem with that. She continues, saying how a simple thank you would be appreciated, but then quickly tells him not to say it because it will embarrass her. In that moment, Gia notices Mitchell's expression. He's crying. Her heart sinks, and she gets flustered, telling him she's fine and not to worry about her. But Mitchell apologizes again. Gia's never seen Mitchell so vulnerable before. He continues apologizing, hiding his face with his hand. It's a side of him she's never seen, and it makes her reflect on her own upbringing. Growing up, Gia's parents always seemed mature, and she thought she'd be the same when she got older. But when she reached the age they had her, she realized she wasn't as mature as they had been at that point. When she mentioned this to her dad, he admitted he never considered himself mature. He just acted that way in front of her, eventually growing accustomed to it. Watching Mitchell cry, Gia has a realization. She's been relying on him. Someone who can seem like a clown at times, but also very mature. But deep down she knows now that Mitchell is just like everyone else, pretending to be mature. He's just been acting too. Taking a deep breath, Gia sternly tells Mitchell to stop crying and asks why he's sitting there, tears in his eyes at his age. She demands to know if crying will solve any of their problems. At this moment, Gia transformed into Mitchell's mother, disciplining him with the overwhelming force of a baguette. Mitchell bursts into uncontrollable laughter, and Gia is relieved he's playing along with her teacher-student role-play. She continues with a sarcastic remark about how Mitchell didn't filter what he said in front of his teacher, which only makes him laugh more. Mitchell mentions how incredible Gia is, almost like his mum is really there with them. Gia, a bit surprised, tries to think of any similarities she might share with Mitchell's mother, but decides to move on for the sake of her sanity. She then asks if Mitchell is feeling better now. Mitchell explains that he's not just feeling better, it feels like they're on vacation rather than stranded. He even thought he was dreaming when he saw the protein powder earlier. Gia laughs, admitting she had the same thought. Suddenly, Mitchell apologizes, acknowledging that Gia is going through all this trouble because of him. This leaves Gia speechless for a moment, but after a sigh she tells him to listen carefully. She explains how Mitchell has gotten into the habit of apologizing even when he hasn't done anything wrong. It's a bad habit, a form of escapism. While there might be times when it's appropriate, when he's with Gia, he should never apologize without a real reason. To reinforce her point, she flicks Mitchell's forehead, but Mitchell's still confused. He doesn't know what else to do in situations like this because Gia got hurt trying to help him. Gia tells him she doesn't know either and insists that he figure it out because he's not a kid anymore. Mitchell smiles, grateful for Gia's words, and praises her for doing such a great job gathering food and saving him. Caught off guard, Gia appreciates the compliment, but then Mitchell says, "I love you." Gia blushes, and before she can react, Mitchell steps in from behind and hugs her tightly. He continues to say he likes her, not letting her escape. Gia asks if he's doing this because he feels sick. Mitchell confirms he's sick and currently being taken care of by Gia, making her blush even more. Gia is still confused and attempts to pull away from Mitchell's embrace. However, before she can fully escape, she lets out a gasp as Mitchell makes a move. They share a brief but intense moment before the scene shifts to the next morning. Mitchell is hard at work and Gia is in disbelief. Despite still recovering, Mitchell has crafted DIY dumbbells and is doing bicep curls. He explains that he's been feeling the urge to work out and couldn't afford to lose any muscle mass. Gia is speechless. Frustrated, she asks why Mitchell is working out when they're both suffering from hunger, heat and exhaustion. Mitchell, however, calmly explains that a healthy mind produces a healthy body, and in their current situation, it's even more important to stay active. He then flexes and asks if Gia would like to join him, but she declines. As Mitchell continues doing pull-ups, Gia reflects on their situation. So much has happened since they arrived. Close calls, overwhelming stress. But she has a feeling that somehow things will work out. In a moment of warmth, Gia walks over to Mitchell, wraps her arms around him and snuggles into his chest. Mitchell, confused at first, softens and holds her gently as she rests in his embrace. The tension of the moment fades, and for a brief second it feels like they're just two people in a chaotic world, trying to hold on to each other. Gia looks at Mitchell, urging him not to move. Mitchell, still confused, asks if this is some kind of punishment for what happened last night. Gia avoids the question, instead leaning in for a kiss. Just as their lips are about to meet, Gia's parents suddenly appear beside them, looking on in disbelief. Gia freezes for a moment, processing what just happened, and then quickly hides behind Mitchell in embarrassment, mortified that her parents just witnessed them in such an intimate moment. Her parents, clearly stunned, suggest that they take a walk and come back later so Gia and Mitchell can finish their activities. Still flustered, Gia is red-faced and tense, while Mitchell shields her from their gaze. Gia, feeling overwhelmed, calls out for them to take her back to the hotel. She curls up in a ball on the bed, trying to escape the embarrassment of the situation. Gia's parents are confused as to why she's still in shock. Gia isn't shocked, though. She realizes the remote island they thought they were stranded on was actually just a short 4-hour walk from a tourist attraction. They were only discovered because a passing boat noticed the smoke from their fire. Gia feels foolish for not figuring it out sooner, especially since no true deserted island would have so much everyday waste washing up on shore. Her mum, still a bit confused, wonders why Gia isn't back to normal now that she's safe, which is the most important thing. Determined to make up for lost time, Gia's mum starts preparing to get back to sightseeing. But Gia, frustrated, can't understand why her mum isn't concerned about her, especially since she was so worried about her mum's safety earlier. Seeing Jia's frustration, her dad steps in and explains that her mum was actually incredibly worried. She couldn't sleep and insisted on searching for Jia, even though they tried to stop her. Her mum knew Jia was alive and couldn't rest until she found her. Jia's dad gently reminds her to enjoy the rest of her vacation with Mitchell, as they'll be leaving tomorrow. Jia's frustration starts to ease, and she agrees to stop sulking. Now with Mitchell, Jia doesn't feel like sightseeing at all. She's sick of travelling and just wants to relax in the room. She turns to Mitchell and asks if he agrees, if you know what she means. Mitchell, however, is ready for a full day of sightseeing and isn't having it. Jia reiterates that they were just stranded, so they need to relax a bit. Yet, Jia and Mitchell are now under the scorching sun at a lighthouse, surrounded by a crowd, eating ice cream while watching dolphins in the sea. Jia is convinced this won't be relaxing, but her expression tells a different story. Suddenly, Mitchell is carrying Jia because she tripped while running in excitement. She says it reminds her of the old days, referring to their childhood. Mitchell, however, mentions how this happened during their honeymoon, which makes Jia recall the day she suddenly got married to him. So many heart-fluttering moments followed, and she tells Mitchell that she wants to do something special when they get back home. Back in Korea, Jia and Mitchell's story is all over social media. However, the iced hot Americano lady demands that Yandu bring the girl in the photo to her with a very menacing look. Some subtle foreshadowing, if you ask me. This all started because, before returning to Korea, Jia was approached for an interview. Their survival story had become big news. Jia isn't one to turn down such opportunities, but Mitchell had other plans. He used his hand to block the sun from Jia's eyes, and she was happy about it. She nudged him with her elbow, and that moment ended up going viral online. At the cafe, Naria asks Jia if she enjoyed it. Jia, confused, doesn't know what she's talking about. Naria explains that being stranded on an island brings to mind certain images, struggling to survive, facing countless conflicts which eventually bring them closer. And of course, all-night spicy activities. Jia initially doesn't understand, but then she realizes and is disgusted. She gets embarrassed and asks what Nari is talking about. Nari explains that it's only natural for a married couple left alone on a deserted island. After all, why else would people in rural areas have so many children? It's tied to those intimate interactions. Nari asks Jia for stories, but Jia sighs and explains that being in a shipwreck is no joke. They were hungry, hot, and exhausted. Nari begs to hear more, but Jia can't think of anything. Suddenly, images of Mitchell on top of her and various other spicy activities flash through her mind, making her face glow red in embarrassment. Nari notices this and comments how Jia must have really enjoyed herself. She's also jealous because she's been working twice as hard, covering for the manager who's been having a lovey-dovey vacation with her husband. Jia denies that it was anything like that. Just then, Yenu walks in and asks Jia if it was really that good. They're both shocked to see Yenu here. She immediately asks Nari for the inventory list she was supposed to do, and Nari responds that she only has one item left to count. Yenu then asks if Jia has time to talk later, to which Jia reluctantly agrees. Later, at an apartment building, Jia nervously stands in the elevator, making sure to be perfectly on time. She wonders why she's being called, especially after having 10+ missed calls from Yenu. But there was nothing Jia could do. She was busy surviving. She remembers how strict Yenu was in college, so she's worried about what's going to happen. The elevator opens, and Jia notices Yenu's door is open, with boxes outside. She nonchalantly enters and apologizes for the missed calls, only to find Yenu wearing clown glasses and setting up decorations. Jia quickly realizes she's made a fatal mistake. Yenu takes off her party outfit and sighs, saying that Jia came an hour early, even though she was told not to come early. Jia apologizes but is relieved because she thought Yenu was mad. However, Yenu is upset that she spent all morning setting up the decorations. Jia is touched by this, but Yenu insists she's not petty, even though Jia ruined the surprise. Jia brushes it off and tells Yenu to forget about it, playfully offering her a skewered hot dog. Yenu chews it, then looks at Jia and hugs her out of nowhere. She cries on Jia's shoulder, saying she was so worried because Jia disappeared without saying anything, asking if she's okay. Jia reassures her, telling her to calm down. Yenu quickly pulls away, and Jia, slightly offended, grumbles about how fast she pulled back. Yenu then mentions how she saw Jia's interview and thought it was funny, which makes Jia blush. Yenu asks if anyone has contacted her, but Jia, still munching, seems confused. Yenu explains that people can get famous from situations like hers and become influencers. Jia scoffs and says to get real, adding that she's only trending on YouTube, so it's not a big deal. Yenu remains skeptical, pointing out that Jia cleaned up her social media from her author days, meaning only a handful of people can contact her. After hearing this, Yenu glances at an email she received from Yomi Entertainment about Jia. Jia smiles before Yenu deletes it.